Podcasting from Portland East to Portland West, from Big Pine Key to Pacific Beach, and from San Juan to Guam, this is All Across America. Jenna, well, it's great to have you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here, Mark.
Well, you're a disability advocate. Let's start with, how long have you used a wheelchair for?
Yeah, I've been in a manual wheelchair for 37 years and diagnosed for 38 years.
Wow. Okay. And so starting at what age?
I was diagnosed at age 7 and in a wheelchair by age 8.
Wow. Okay. My oldest son just turned 8. So I can imagine, and maybe you could just describe the circumstances at that time and what happened.
Yeah, the story goes that our family was out at a city flooded ice rink because we're in northern Minnesota. Would have been like late January, early February. And the family story goes that I had fallen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember that at all. But the next morning, I do remember being in our goldenrod, lovely cast bathtub. That's the word I was looking for. And, of course, goldenrod because it was the late 80s. So got to give a shout out to the 70s, even though I wasn't around then. But I remember being in the bathtub and I was probably screwing around because I was only a little first grader. And all of a sudden, my right knee floated to the top of the bubbles. And it was like, Mom! And I pulled up my other knee to compare it to. And the left knee was a little kid knee and the right knee was twice the size, about the size of an American softball.
Wow.
And so, of course, I yelled for my mommy because mommies make everything better. And that led to seeing my labor and delivery doctor. And he's like, you have water on the knee. And my dad was a volunteer ambulance driver earlier in his career. And he's like, that doesn't seem right. My daughter is not an athlete. She's 7 years old. We're not going to let you shove a needle into my little girl's knee. Let's get a second opinion. So the other town doctor, which was amazing for our small rural town to have 2 different options for GPs at that time. And he kind of took one look at me and took blood work and was like, nope, I believe you have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So we need to send you down to Duluth, the next bigger city, and see a rheumatologist.
Yeah.
And they diagnosed me, again, with more blood work and x-rays and all the things. But at that time, I also had to go down to Rochester to the Mayo Clinic because at that time, Lyme's disease was fresh on the scene.
Yeah.
And so many of the symptoms were similar. So I had to go to the big dogs and have them rule out Lyme's disease. So they were treating the right issue. And that was a whole different experience as a little 7-year-old. Well, at that time, I would have been 8. And doctors speaking English as their second language and the thick accents and trying to understand what's an accent and what's a medical term. And, really only understanding when they gave me lollipops and stickers, the occurrency of childhood, right?
Yes, yes.
So, and they always gave them after the big shots and the big painful times, versus prepping us and then doing the bad thing. It's always the opposite.
Yeah. I'm with you. That maybe our medical system needs to be transformed, that children get the lollipops before the procedure rather than after. So it could be part of your advocacy.
Right. Give us the snuggly teddy bears and the lollipops and popsicles before.
Right.
But then again, maybe not, because then we'd get the sugar high and probably punch him or something.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
Right. So, so that started my journey.
Wow. And so you remember, I'd imagine, your time before your disability when you were just a regular kid.
Yeah, I have, different family memories. I was definitely a tom girl or a tomboy. So, hanging outside, doing lots of fishing, going grouse hunting with my black lab and my dad.
Yeah.
Playing outside, making snow forts, all the fun stuff. But I still had fun after I was disabled. It was a different type.
And then what was that like for your family? Because, here, not to say that it was sudden, but it was, relatively, it sounds like within a matter of a couple of months. I'm the second floor of my home. All of our bedrooms are on the second floor. We don't have an elevator. How did that work in your home? I mean, how were lives transformed?
Yeah, great question. So my 2 oldest siblings are 16 and 15 years older than me. So they were already out of the house. And then my next oldest sibling is 12 years older. So she was just starting college, but still lived at home for that first year. And so she was already in a downstairs bedroom, but my family had a split level. So they had to pull me up in my wheelchair, like the 5 steps once we got in the main door. So that was a lot. And I don't even remember how many years that was until my dad took out a window that was in our kitchen area. And there was enough room between that and the next apple tree so he could fit a wooden ramp that my dad and I think it was an uncle and a friend helped build. And
Yeah.
so that just became the main entrance to the house after that, which helped a ton because my mom trying to lift me and my chair weight, because at that time, wheelchairs were not lightweight like they are now.
Yeah.
And I actually had to rent a pediatric wheelchair that was more like a hospital level kind of chair back in that time.
Mm,
So big, old, clanky, heavy, gross, not fun to sit in,
right.
all the things. And it was army green. Like, what little
Fun.
kid wants to sit in an army green wheelchair?
Right.
But. But then my second oldest sibling, when she was done with college, she came back to help my mom out with me because my dad had to live up on the Iron Range as a millwright for an iron ore company.
Yeah.
And so he was gone for long stretches at time. So, yeah, so the family dynamics changed a lot. I mean, even with my birth order, I am the baby of the family, but I'm also kind of like an only child just from
Yeah.
that sense, let alone also being all my siblings are non-disabled and I'm the only disabled one. So,
Right. Right.
different dynamics, different whatever, but I don't know any different, right? So
Yeah.
I always say I'm very thankful that I became disabled when I was a kid because kids are resilient. And when you don't
Yeah.
know any different, it's just life. And not that it necessarily makes the discrimination and the oppression and all the negative sides of things any easier. I think maybe kids have a little bit more grace and just
Yeah.
different levels of acceptance and dealing with things. And I just have a different attitude and disposition as well. So I think that just always, you know, translates differently as well. So,
You had mentioned your wheelchair and been very heavy. Have you how has the technology changed? What's your first Army Green wheelchair like versus what you've got now?
oh, it's night and day.
Yeah.
The one I'm in currently is made out of titanium. It's made from
Wow.
Canada. It I have what it's called. It can go down in the dump position. So like I can do almost a beginning of a stand with it, and then it can go
Wow.
down into dump to get pressure off my spine. And
Okay.
then the back of the wheelchair can come up to 90 to be like an office chair, and then rotate back to get again the load off your spine. And me and my OT were talking for years because I was like, every time you needed to make a change in any manual wheelchair seating for my first like 30 years, you always had to have a non-disabled hands to use Allen wrenches and screwdrivers to change your positioning. And I'm like, this is ridiculous because you have office chairs where everybody else just gets to hit a little
Right?
paddle and
Right. Boom, you're up
self-adjust
lower,
and
my seat goes back. Yeah.
right, and I'm like, why do you guys all get all the fun and the
Right.
comfiness and we're
Yeah.
stuck being static 90/90? So
Yeah.
I did a lot of research. Like I said, probably about 8 years ago is when I got my first one. It's a PDG elevation. But unfortunately, last year they stopped making this. So I kind of
Oh,
stockpiled another one in my parents' basement that somebody was trying to get rid of as a floor model. And I'm like, I will buy it privately. So I have this when I need a new
nice.
one in 6 years.
Or you could use it for
So,
parts, you could just
right,
park it in front of your house and, like an old just
right.
on cinder blocks.
Don't give my dad any ideas. How many of these chairs am I storing? And I'm like, well, all the quickies can go away because their
Right.
parts don't work on this one. But yeah, I'm like, Dad, you haven't been down in our basement in like what, 3 to 5 years? How do you even know what I have down
Right,
there? It's
right.
fine.
And so how much do these things cost?
Well, I know my current one is about $8,000,
Okay, yeah,
and
yeah,
that's a lot.
yeah, it sure is. Uh,
So,
and you're so close to Canada. What is what is it like for people with disabilities across the border compared to the United States?
it's a great question. I don't know a ton just from what I've seen, lots of the different social media groups that I'm a part of. I think we as Americans always forget that the rest of the world doesn't have the Americans with Disabilities Act. They might have something kind of
Wow,
similar in their country, but not always. Obviously, their medical system is very different in Canada than
sure.
America. And I know we have different viewpoints on what that may or may not, pros and cons of their system versus ours.
Right.
And then even in my own head, I don't always, I can't wrap my head around how their system works. I've heard great things on certain stories, and then I've heard horror stories on other sides of the aisle of,
Oh, wow. Okay.
having to wait like a year and a half for a knee replacement. And it's like, so then
Yes.
you're homebound and you can't live life. And then the rest of your health, gets
Deteriorates.
worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you're waiting for that magical day for you to have surgery. So, yeah. I would say, depending on the climate and area, like everybody's always like, why did you go back to Two Harbors? Why are you on the North Shore of Lake Superior? There's
Right.
snow and there's ice and there's all the things for like 6 months of our time. And it's like, well, currently I'm here because this is where my support system is and this is where
Yeah.
my family is and my medical
Right.
team. And I've invested in my medical team as much as they've invested in me.
Yeah.
But as my team started retiring and that kind of stuff, good friends of mine are always like, you always said that you would move south, maybe just to Iowa, but that's still south compared to
Yeah.
close to the Canadian border.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um, so maybe someday I'll move to my home away from home in Decorah, Iowa. But for right now, I'm where I'm at, and we just
Yeah.
figure out how to deal with winter and all the different accessibility things that come my way.
Right. So what would you say is the hardest piece in terms of accessibility?
Attitude.
Really? Can you
Yep.
talk more about that?
Yeah. A lot of people believe that because we're in America and we have the ADA, everything's just accessible.
Right.
Well, there's a law. And it's like, well, yes, there is a law that should be protecting our rights, but it's the largest unfunded mandate the United States government has ever put in place.
Mhm.
So you can say that we're supposed to be, but when you have, especially in rural America, when most of it is small mom and pop type, restaurants and industry and tourism and all that kind of stuff, there isn't funding to help them do those things.
I see.
Um,
Okay.
and the attitude of, the belief system that accessibility is always more expensive. Well, it's more expensive if you don't involve disabled people at the table when your ideas are coming to be.
Yeah.
Because if you go and build a building or you go and make a bathroom accessible, but you don't involve the very people that are going to use it, or you don't use universal design principles, you're going to go back and have to retrofit. And then you as the owner are going to be super mad because you just spent
It's
$5,000 and
always more expensive,
redoing.
yes, redoing
Correct.
than getting it right in the first place. You used the
Right.
term universal design. What is that?
Yeah. So my definition of it is where you are trying to use as many building principles to make things as accessible for everyone,
Mhm.
not just a certain demographic. So, like, it's kind of like the curb cut effect, right? So you can use a
Yeah.
curb cut when you've got a stroller. You can use it when you've got a
Yes.
wheeled suitcase. You can use it when you're using a
Yes.
dolly for delivery, right? Like, it makes everybody's life
Yes, and
easier.
everybody has used the curb cut. I mean, I pushed a stroller around when my wife and I lived in Brooklyn, and,
Yep.
every delivery driver ever has used a curb cut.
Yep. So, yeah, so that's what it means. And yet, I'd be remiss if I also didn't mention on the flip side, though, is like everybody wants to use that as like, well, everybody can use it. And it's like, that is true and that's important. However, is a disabled life not as important if they were only used by wheelchair or
Yeah,
mobility device people?
right.
Would we still value that? And would we
Yeah,
still put them in at whatever expense it is because we value the lives of the people who are using mobility devices? And so I don't try to whitewash it with saying, hey, it's usable by everybody, but I try to make that connection of like, have you used one today? Yep. Have you used a power button today? Probably when your arms were full and you're carrying groceries. Like,
yeah,
yes, it makes life easier for non disabled people in certain situations, but it makes life attainable for those of us with disabilities. Like, I can't be independent. And so a lot of times people are like, I don't understand when you say it's the environment that makes you more disabled. And I come back and I share the story of, I taught in two different schools. Well, in my one school, my band room was completely one level. I could get to a student anywhere. I could get to an instrument anywhere. I could move chairs and music stands anywhere.
yeah,
But I went to my other school and it had a tiered choir room, which meant it was all cement and it was steps. If a kid was on the top and they started having a seizure, I, as the licensed teacher, couldn't get to them to provide the safety that they needed.
Wow. Yeah.
I couldn't move instruments. I couldn't do XYZ. And so it wasn't that my disability became more or less, right? Disability is just disability. It's not a bad word. It just is.
Yeah.
But you put me in an environment that makes me more disabled. And that's the issue.
Right. It reminds me of the story of Judy Heumann, who was refused a teaching license in New York State.
Yep. Yeah. I was so sad that I didn't know more about Judy earlier in my career in life. But
Yeah.
during my 2020 Bush Fellowship and probably the last 3 years of her life, I got to know her story and her podcast and read both of her books and
Oh, wow.
just became enthralled with it, and especially that part of her story. Like, man, that would have been such encouragement had I known her story as a
Yeah.
disabled music educator fighting the systems in Minnesota many
Yeah.
decades later. But thanks to her and her I'm not going to take it anymore attitude, and I should be able to teach like anyone else, like, I probably wouldn't be a teacher if it wasn't for
Wow.
her.
Can
So,
you tell folks about Judy Heumann who may not know about her?
yeah, they call her the mother of disability rights in America and actually for the whole world.
Wow.
She not only like you shared about, fighting the New York State education system back in the, ooh, I don't remember the year, probably the 60s. She also helped with the sit-ins for Section 504. She was instrumental in that, where disabled people sat in, oh gosh, it was in California.
Yeah, in San
I think
Francisco, federal
there
building.
you go. Yeah. And then they also had similar sit-ins in Washington, D.C. and Chicago. And so it's just awesome in her book called Being Human, Heumann. In her memoir, just situations you wouldn't even think about in that, like disabled people giving up their medication time, disabled people not getting their meals on time, especially if they're diabetic. And then one of the motorcycle gangs showing up and like storming the gate and bringing the meds and bringing the food and, just unlikely supporters that supported the movement and gave us the rights that we have today. And Judy went on to be the disability coordinator, for lack of a better word, but she advised, I believe it was President Clinton and President Obama.
Yeah.
She did a lot of international work in foreign countries, third world countries, getting them to start having the policies, procedures, and laws
Mhm.
to embrace disabled lives. Was huge in trying to get more disabled people into the workforce and having equitable and meaningful employment. Yeah, I mean, just go and check her out if you don't know who she is, because she is pretty amazing, and the
Yeah.
legacy she leaves behind is phenomenal.
You had recommended in somewhere online to watch the documentary Crip Camp, which I just
Yep.
saw last night, which was an amazing documentary, incredible. I was nominated for the Academy Award. Judy
Yep.
was featured in that. I
Mhm.
mean, it was just fascinating. I'm a big documentary fan, and I can't believe I just saw it now. And I just wish that everybody had the chance to watch it. And anybody listening, check it out. Crip Camp. It's available on Netflix, and I'm sure you've seen it at least once, if not more. It's very
Several.
inspiring. Very, very inspiring story. And it was interesting in that these children talked about how when they were in their normal lives in their neighborhood, wherever they were a person with a disability. At the camp, they're just a kid. Where do you feel most like just a regular person in your life?
Mm, Great question. I would say I feel the most at home with my good friend Jamie, who I talk about in my book a lot. She was kind of my wheelie mentor. Her and I have the same disease. She was diagnosed when she was 2. I was diagnosed when I was
Wow.
7.
Yeah.
So, she's my bestie. She's also the president of my nonprofit. She's somebody that I trust not only with my life, but with my work. And she really brought me into disability culture. She's the reason I joined junior high wheelchair basketball in the neighboring town. Got to go to Camp Courage, which was a disability camp down in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. And just was really entered into what disability culture was. Because again, rural Minnesota, there's a handful of disabled kids in the special education classes and programs for me. I mean, I saw lots of different, kids and adults when I'd go down to physical rehab and occupational rehab. But it's just different. Like, and until my Bush Fellowship, and I was able to dive into some of the history and the different models, between medical model, rehabilitation model, societal model. Like there's so many different aspects and facets to disability community and culture. And then I also talk in my book as well as like some of the places I feel most me, as you said, is in places where I can just be me. Like the bathrooms are accessible. The couches and chairs are accessible. Like what I called quote unquote Jenna friendly. So
Right.
if you can do XYZ in that space and I can do XYZ in that space, awesome. Now we can have vulnerable, deep, real, authentic conversations and relationship and all the things. But if you're so focused on, oh, I can't eat that because then I'll have to use the restroom, but the restroom is not safe for me, or I can't
Yeah.
actually even do it. Well, then I'm not going to be fully there and fully present with you because I'm going to be thinking about all of these other just basic needs that the rest of you don't ever have to think about.
Right, I mean, everything's gotta be planned in a way where, able-bodied folks, you just step out the door and get it done. Well,
Right.
what's it like, just running basic errands? Describe what it's like. You leave your house, you've gotta go to the post office, and then you've gotta get, I don't know, a couple items at the grocery store.
Right. Yeah. For me, I learned early on in my teaching career that I think 4 steps ahead. And I never thought about that until my principal pulled me in her office. I was a parochial school, so she was a sister, and she's like, Jenna, I went to school with a disabled person and we were roommates. And she's like, there's just so many things you have to think about. And I never really thought about that. But when you see someone else is seeing your story and then bringing it to light, is fantastic. And yet, like, wow, that no wonder why I'm always exhausted.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it was, answering your question, it's tons of planning ahead because sometimes I can be independent because I have an accessible van and I can just do my thing, right? I can get out of my apartment door. I can use the elevator to get downstairs. I can use the power button to get out the main door. I can use my accessible van. But then, oh, now I'm hoping that there's an accessible parking spot in front of our post office because there's not an accessible parking spot because it's on a street and it's on a
Wow.
hill.
Right. Right.
So then I might want to find somebody to go with me or hope that there's a kind stranger or somebody that recognizes me and then, use their power button because thankfully our post office has them, but not all federal buildings have them.
Wow.
And if yours doesn't, you should advocate for that and get a hold of your postmaster. PSA right there, right? Then go in and do it. And usually I met with high counters. Some places try to do lower counters, but then what I experience is usually people aren't ever posted at them. I'm like, if you have a low counter, everybody can use the low counter by and large. So you
Yes.
should have the low counter manned first and
Right.
then the taller ones supported later. But that hasn't
Makes
caught on
sense.
yet.
Yeah.
And then, I'd have to hop in my van again. And the hard part is like all of that just takes time, right? And
Yeah.
so if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's whatever, you're completely drenched. By the time your lift comes out, you get on, you get it all
Right.
taken care of. Getting in the grocery store, a lot of times I take my PCA or homemaker with me just because it's either, everything's high. It
What do you
never
mean by
fails.
what's a PCA?
Oh, good question. Personal care attendant.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I usually have somebody with me out on errands. Not always, but it is kind of funny when I'm by myself in the store. I'm not a big fan when people are like, hey, slow down. Hey, you're running in the aisle. Because it's like not necessarily okay to say, right? But
Yeah.
then there are times when I'm like, oh, I am kind of just flying through this empty aisle, which you guys would like be at a breakneck speed. But sometimes I am because I don't
Yeah.
have a lot of time.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um, but my favorite when I'm shopping is always like, especially finding shorter females, is like, hey, can I borrow your height? I always like turn around like, who are you talking to? And they're like, me? I'm like, yeah, I know I have like a really tall,
Yeah.
wingspan. Thankfully, I am physically tall, but when you put me in my chair, kind of
Right.
takes away some of the height. But they're always like, I'm only 5'2" and you asked to borrow my height. I'm like, well, technically I'm five
Yeah.
seven, but
Uh,
that's okay. I want you to feel good, honey. So,
that's
yep, if
great.
you can reach that ice cream for me, that'd be awesome.
It's like calling somebody who's 70 young man.
Right.
95-year-old, "Hey, young man, can you" Wow,
Yep.
yeah, that's, and how often do you have the companion with you? How many hours per week generally?
Per week, about 9.
Okay.
And then I have like 5 hours of homemaking for like shopping and laundry and deep house cleaning, that kind of stuff. So Yeah.
I remember reading something once that persons, when they travel, particularly to countries where they don't understand the language, their creative part of their brain like lights up because they've got
Mhm.
to navigate a world that's different from, the one that they know back at home. Would you say that could be true in some ways for disabled folks, that they're engaging their brain? I mean, just the logistics of, getting from point A to point B. Do you feel like you use your brain just more than, able-bodied people in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say our brains are amazing, right? And like they can adapt quicker than we even consciously know that the brain's adapting and making new neural pathways.
Yeah.
I would also say disabled people by and large have to be innovative and they have to be creative, and you're always problem solving because that's
Yeah.
just the life that we find ourselves in, where we weren't made for this world or this world wasn't made for us, whichever way you want to
Yeah.
look at it. Some
Right.
places people live in places that were made for them and that's awesome, but that's not typically that story.
Yeah.
And yet on the flip side too, sometimes when I'm in the rehab model, everybody's like, "Yeah, and yeah, and yeah," and I'm like, "Oh, do not inspirationalize us either, because
Yes.
people in chairs can still be jerks. People in walkers can still be jerks," right? Like, I have
Yes.
moments of, like, I'm just done with this, and, like, I'm not professional in this moment because I'm
Yeah.
done, I'm tapped out. So,
Yes.
like
Yes. The "you're an inspiration" cliche. Yes. Yes. You've never heard that one before. Right. Right.
Right. And I
Yeah.
never thought about it until a TikTok lady, which I'm not a huge TikToker, but this is early on in that social media world, and the
Yeah.
clip came through Facebook or whatever, and she's, like, getting a can of soup off the shelf at the grocery store, and some person comes up to them and is like, "You are so inspirational." And she's like, "Getting a can of chicken noodle soup for my kid's dinner tonight is
Right. Right.
inspiring. I think that
Yeah.
says more about you than about
Yeah, it's
me."
like, I can do a little bit more than that, but thank
Right.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, so I
I
oh, good.
yeah, one of those things I was thinking of is that, do you feel that some people, because you have a physical disability, somehow think that you have a mental disability as well? I mean, do you get talked to at times like you're a small child, or
Absolutely, I would say less now that I'm middle-aged, maybe some of
Okay.
the twinkly gray hair help, but when I was, like, in high school and college, for sure, or you get treated like an inanimate object. Like, I remember
Right.
a friend was trying to push me through a snow-covered parking lot, and all of a sudden, the worker, she was just off her shift heading to her car, and, I get it, putting a disclaimer out there. But she, like, turned around and she only talked to my friend and she's like, "Oh, do you need help with that?" And my friend had to grab me by the armpit of like, "Don't you dare."
Ah, don't say anything.
Like right, like and I'm just like, "Oh, now I'm a that."
Wow, okay.
Like so, yeah, it's the extreme and yeah, and there are still times, like, I had an administrator at one point, like, pat me on the head. I'm like, "I'm your
Wow.
employee, and I'm in
Yeah,
my 30s."
yeah.
And I'm tenured and
Yeah,
I've
that's
been
very
working for
demeaning.
you for
Yes.
right, and, like, even what I just did, right? Like, I shouldn't have to say, "I'm a master level teacher," or, "I'm your employee," or I'm like,
Right.
"Why would you ever go to another adult human and pat them on the head?" You
My
wouldn't do it
eight-year-old wouldn't like that.
right. Exactly. So, yeah, there's just lots of things where people don't get it, and it is very interesting, and I think a lot of it is also human psychology, and I'm not trying to give an out for ignorance or an out for, our choices, but the example that I have is I also had a power chair from when I would be conducting, and so the power chair would raise me up 6 inches in the air so I could actually be seen by my kids
Yeah.
while I was conducting, and one day, just for a social experiment, I left my chair up at 6 inches and I rolled through the halls. And the looks I got from my coworkers was just like, "Oh," and then I'd engage in a conversation and give them eye contact at their level, and they were so uncomfortable
Wow.
because 'cause they're always used to looking down at me.
Right. Right.
So then they had to look at me And it was just profound.
Wow.
It just gives me goosebumps even thinking about it, but it's just
Yeah.
like, why do we have to do that? And again, some of it's just human psychology because of how we look or how we look. But yeah, so just things for us to think about in our unconscious biases of like, oh, well, if I was actually looking this person in the eye, would I still talk with that inflection in my voice
Mhm.
or that
Right.
baby sing song?
Right,
Or,
boy.
yeah, there's a non verbally speaking person in front of me, but they're 50 years old. Would I really talk to them like a 2-year old?
Exactly. Y
So there's just lots of modeling and lots of mental scripts that we need to flip the narrative on and
Okay.
give new tools for people to engage with people in disability community and culture.
So what are some of those tools?
The biggest thing I always say is just asking curious questions. Like, I would say not all disabled people have a sixth sense, but I'll call it for me myself is like I can usually understand pretty quickly in reading body language and reading a person and reading their verbal usage of, are you cool with this? Like you and I are cool. We're having a conversation. We both are engaged. We both want to know more, do more, be better, right? Be better humans. So if it's a trusted environment, just always making sure you're asking the same question you'd ask somebody who wasn't disabled.
Right.
So if you're not going to ask Mark how he brushed his teeth today, why would you ask me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you wouldn't ask you how you use the restroom, why would you ask me?
Right.
Now, if it was thing and you knew someone had to use the restroom and you're asking if there's any way you could assist or any way
Right.
that you could support them, I think support is a much better word than saying help.
Mhm. I like that.
Um, so there's just different keywords to look up in the thesaurus and just
Yeah.
kind of put yourself in that space. I also just saw Emily Ladau. She's another amazing disability advocate out there, Laudau, and she wrote a book called Demystifying Disability. And she had just posted in her newsletter, I think it was yesterday or the day before, of sorry, I forgot where I was going because I wanted to make sure y'all had the information. Oh,
Emily.
Emily Ladau. She had said, it's this time of year for schools. And so she always gets this email onslaught from college students, especially. Hey, I'm a part of this class and we're supposed to find a disabled person. We need to ask you these 10 questions.
Oh,
Will you
boy.
email us back all these really intimate level questions, daily living questions, and then thanks. And if you can do it by Friday, because it's
Right.
due on Monday, that'd be great.
It
And it's
only
like,
take 2 hours of your time.
right. And yet then there's 20 different people from this one class, from this one university. And I'm like, I never thought about that because that hasn't happened to me yet. But it's like, we're not a petri dish specimen. We're not to be tokenized. We're not to be whatever word you want to insert. But again, that's the sign of ableism, right? Like, oh, we don't know any disabled people. And it's like, well, when 1 in 4 Americans identify as disabled,
Wow.
it's not all about seeing a wheelchair or a walker or seeing a
Right.
white cane or seeing an ASL interpreter or, whatever the visual is. There are so many invisible disabilities, and a lot of people don't use that label because it has that negative connotation of being disabled.
Right.
So, yeah, I think, it comes back to the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated. Do you want to get an email that asks you how you brushed your teeth today and how you went to the bathroom?
No.
Well, then why send it to someone else, right? Like,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes I'm like always flabbergasted, like, seriously, that happened? I don't know that I could do that. But then I forget that not the rest of the world doesn't always think like I.
Yeah, it's also like, "Can you do my homework for me, please?"
Right. And it's
What
also like we just want you to answer and we don't want to have a relationship.
Yes, yes, it's that kinda one-way street. Right. So you said, people can help by not offering help, by more so offering support. And, like, what does that look like to you? Support.
I mean, and I would say also, like, asking if people want support, but then you need to be okay that they don't, right? So, like, if like, "Hey, can I grab that door for you?" And I say, "Nope, that's okay, you keep doing you." But then they insist, but yet they're in your way, and you're gonna
Yeah,
run them over, and, like, you have to be okay, like, you're offering that support, but then also, are you offering support to truly be supportive, or are you offering support because you, somewhere inside of yourself, need something? And that's the insecurity that I think a lot of us fight without having those words.
I see.
Because I had a lot of those feelings as a kid and teenager and even 20s, 30s, right? And now that I'm in my
Yeah,
40s, I'm like, oh, here are some words of how I felt when I was in those situations.
yeah,
So yeah, I love, I've got a couple great friends that are just like, "Hey, just wondering, I've got, like an hour or two open this week. Any chance you'd want to get together and anything that I could help you in your apartment with, or any
that's great.
errands I could run, or just like offering mutual aid." And then I'm in the same respect, like, "Hey, any phone calls I can make for you?" Or,
Oh, that's
like
great. Yeah,
whatever it is, because we all have needs. And so if we can share lived experiences and not, I don't want to say the word use each other, but like,
yeah,
you know, help each other out in
right,
life
yeah.
in the ways that we have our strengths and encourage each other to work on our weaknesses, I think it's all better for everyone.
I was and watching Crip Camp, these were young people, mostly teenagers, and they talked about how their parents loved them so much and were so helpful, it was almost hurtful to them that they didn't get that independence that they felt like they needed. What was that like for you, going off to college and it sounds like your parents were wonderful and working with you since a young child, but were they able to let go at a certain point? How did that
Hmm.
work in your life?
Yeah, that's a question I haven't thought about necessarily before. Because we are stoic Scandinavians up here, so we don't talk about a lot of those touchy-feely things. But I guess from my experience, I was just at the local university, so like 30 miles away. So it was
Mhm,
like far enough, yet close enough. So
mhm.
I could come home on a weekend and be like, "Hey, mom, here's all my laundry."
Here's my
Or she
laundry.
would swing down, or here's some food and here's your laundry.
Yeah,
But I think it was hard especially for my mom, because she was the main caregiver.
okay.
And her whole world was my whole world since age 7, right?
Yeah,
So, I'm sure it wasn't easy, but she also knows that I'm stubborn and I'm gonna stand up for myself, and I'm not gonna be a doormat for anyone. Not gonna be rude about it, but I'm also, gonna self-advocate. And college wasn't super easy. I love my freshman year and lots of things, but I had struggles with discrimination stuff with, like, several of my professors, had to be at the chancellor's office and had a couple different reports done, like, and so you just think like, "Oh, you get higher education, you get older, it gets easier, the adulting world is great and more inclusive." And the reality back in the late 90s, early 2000s, some were awesome and some were not awesome. And so, I think especially for the caregiver side of things, and even my older sibling that came home to help my mom with me and that kind of stuff, we've had lots of conversations. And I think if older siblings take on that caregiver role, that also becomes great in a very, stable relationship by and large. But sometimes you have to have that self reflective time too. Like,
yeah.
is this Jenna my little sister? Is this Jenna the fellow educator? Because she also was an educator. And then she became my administrator. So it's like,
Oh, wow.
oh, am I talking to you as the older sibling or as the principal? Or
Yeah, right.
And so, like any relationship, any family dynamics, it just adds another level of Jumanji to
Right.
navigate and talk through
Yeah,
and figure out. But I think the more that caregivers can unite with other caregivers is super paramount. But then I will also say, in the work with Above and Beyond with you, my good friend Jamie and I have ran into different scenarios where caregivers are like, "Yeah, we get it. We know how to do this. We know how to make this space accessible." And her and I, as like, you know, almost 80 years of joint accessibility, disability life, are like, "Well, you know what life is like as the caregiver.
Right.
You don't know what it's like as the actual person dealing with the pain and the chronic disease in our case, or, whatever it is that is your disabling condition on top of what society and barriers are creating for you. So again, we all have our important piece to the puzzle. All of our stories are important and they all make a beautiful tapestry of life. But we have to make sure that we stay in our lanes and only speak about our experiences and not
Mhm.
cross over to make people think different scenarios because, again, we all have different lived experience.
Yeah, and you had mentioned a quarter of Americans have some form of disability, and I mean, I guess when people think of disability, they think wheelchair. But what else is there that is, maybe more hidden disability than others?
Yeah, I mean, all of the learning disabilities, dyslexia, ADHD, ADD, I mean, there's just tons of alphabet soup, right? Because we all
Yeah,
love
yeah,
acronyms in this day and
yes,
age.
yes.
Depending on what experience somebody has with autism, sometimes autism
Okay,
is
sure.
considered a disability, other times
Right,
it's not. Vision disabilities, sometimes that's seeable or,
right.
seeable from the outside, sometimes it's not. Different mental health conditions are also seen as disabilities. Sometimes being a diabetic or having allergies or all of those different medical conditions can also be seen as a disability. So
Yeah,
it really depends on the setting in which you're in and it depends on the comfort level. And that's why we say 1 in 4 Americans identify with being disabled because we know that our population grows every day. And so there's a lot of people that don't identify as disability or as disabled, but technically they are.
yeah,
So, you know, yeah, so it's interesting. And, then there's another population, that says, well, if you're lucky enough to live long enough, you'll be disabled because disability is just a natural progression
sure. For the
of
elderly.
human life. It's
Yeah,
just of the
yeah,
human condition. So,
yeah.
why we still feel like, survival of the fittest is most important, that youth and athleticism and all these things have to look a certain way, right? You can be
Right.
older and disabled and still be an athlete.
Yeah,
Shocker.
yeah,
Like there's just so many things that we don't even realize we're believing, whether it's from, media, social media, just societal things. And yet it's also interesting too, because in some cultures or different people groups, disability doesn't even have a word because
really.
it's they're just humans, right?
Yeah,
They're just their aunt, their uncle. They're just
yeah,
mom or dad, just their
yeah.
child. They're just, you know. And so that's very interesting when you're trying to, in America and in the Western world, collect all this data. Because when we're a more diverse population and then they don't take into account the different cultures, like, well, yes, grandma uses a wheelchair, but in our culture, she's not disabled, she's grandma.
Right.
So,
She's just elderly.
right, she's just older adult, she's our elder,
Yeah,
she's our, whatever cultural
yeah.
words that they would use. Yep.
Do you find that older people who, understand that their body wasn't once what it was are better able to understand what it's like to live with a disability in some respects?
I would say yes and no. Because I think sometimes, especially in the older generation, because I'm thinking of like my parents' age group and
Yeah,
just, local folks that I've known forever. I think it's harder for them because sometimes I get more of the pity side of disability from them
I see.
because it's like, oh, well, I can't complain about my arthritic aches and pains because I've only had arthritis for 20 years, but you've had it for 38.
Mm.
So you get like, again, you know where they're coming from and they're trying to relate, but
Yeah,
yet, you know what I mean? So it's like, yes, I think they get it because now they've experienced a little bit of it, but yet in the same respect, I feel like, at least in my situation and experiences, like they're more isolated. And so then they think that disability culture isn't for them because they're not really disabled. They didn't have an accident. They weren't disabled from birth or from early
yeah,
childhood. They're just old, quote
yeah,
unquote.
yeah.
And that makes me really sad because then in my interpretation, they just feel like they're so alone. And in reality, like, you could still go hunting, thinking of my dad and others, like, you just have to hop in a tractor.
Yeah.
Like life can still be lived, it can still be experienced. It might be experienced in a completely different way
Yeah.
because that's the physical barriers or the physical support that you need, but you can still go and do the things you love. It just
Yeah.
might take longer. It might look different. You might only get to do it twice a year instead of every weekend or like but yeah, so that's what I try to express when I'm around the elders of community and when older people stop me because I read a column, "Oh, I just loved your column this week, and I really like this part of the story," and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, "Well, awesome. So I'll see you at this event." And they're like, "Oh, no." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll see you at this upcoming event. Like, maybe not this week, but how about next month?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so yeah. So I want to bring disability culture and community to all generations of disability and try to help that negative connotation just go away. Because if we don't start in some ways, if we don't start with our elders and the older generation, the things that they believe and the things that they model keep getting passed down.
Yeah.
So, yes, we got to start with the kids. Yes, we got to work in the middle age group. And we can't forget our elders because they also have a lot of legacy and they have a lot of importance and power.
So you're wearing an Above and Beyond with You T-shirt. Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so Above and Beyond with You is a nonprofit in its third year, and our goal is to increase accessibility and inclusion on the North Shore and beyond. And so we do consulting and training. We do presentations. Our whole point is that we do it with you, not to you, because we don't
That's
like
great.
when people do things to us. And we want to build those relationships, right? Because if you have a relationship with business, agency, government, all those kinds of things, you get more work done in a meaningful way than if you're just a drop in the pan and you do one training or you do one
Check the
conversation.
box, sort of. Yeah.
Yes. And that's a great segue because then it's also, we don't believe in being up to code or like having that duty of, like you said, that checklist, but we believe in being committed to going above and beyond the ADA.
Okay.
So everybody thinks that the ADA is the ceiling when really it's the floor. And you can
I
do
see.
way more above what code says.
Yeah.
And it's best, again, to do it with somebody who's in community. So you're meeting as many needs as you can in the physical or attitudinal spaces that you're creating.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Americans with Disability Acts, otherwise known as the ADA. There have been some news stories that have suggested that the ADA has gone, I guess, maybe too far in some respects. The New York Times had an opinion piece recently. It's time to rethink the ADA. There was a piece within the last 6 months about small business websites being targeted by, what were
Mm.
deemed frivolous lawsuits. Essentially, you've got lawyers looking for a legal hook to make a payday, using the ADA as the excuse. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. You know, so number one, I'm very thankful that the ADA is in place. I'm very thankful that Section 504 and IDEA are all a part of our fabric because I wouldn't have been the educated, independent person that I am, right? So thankful to all the forefathers, foremothers that did all the hard work and sacrifice to get the equal human rights that we have in America. That being said, with it being the most unfunded mandate, and that it takes really, truly an act of Congress to change any of the code, really hampers us. And the reality that the medical world moves far faster in the innovations and in how we're saving life and replicating life and improving life, the law can't keep up with it. Right. So, if you say that a toilet has to be between 17 and 19 inches high to be ADA compliant, well, when most power chairs are 21, 25 inches in the air, how do you transfer down almost 8 inches?
Right.
So it's like there has to be some easier way to keep up with how the medical world is changing. And yet the medical world and innovation and the science also needs to remember that ADA toilets are only 17 to 19 inches high, right? So when we're
Right.
creating the new chairs, when we're creating new technology, there has to be some give and take. The flip side of that too is like in that system, the only way that anything changes is through lawsuits. The Department of Justice is the only way that I can go through and help like a local hotel that I just stayed at become compliant. Well, what disabled person has enough money? Yes, there are plenty out there. Like, just because you're disabled does not mean you're below poverty or poor.
Mhm.
However, do I want to use the money that I do have to hire a lawyer to fight over this hotel that I stayed at? Or do I want to just go live life and use that money to go have a coffee at Starbucks? Right? Like, non disabled people don't have to go that route to have their needs met.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And yet I know that it's not a perfect system. And there's not going to be a perfect system because, like I said, everybody is different, let alone every medical condition is different. And the way in which we treat medical conditions and disabilities changes, every 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, right? Like there's
Yeah.
new innovation happening all the time, new technologies all the time. And so sometimes when I see those articles, it's interesting because I mean, ADA is a ginormous law. If I said that I knew everything about the ADA, I'd be lying, right? Like, even to get certified in it, it's an open book test
Oh, wow.
because it's just so inundated. Like, the whole point is like, where to find it
I
within the
see.
law and within the
Yeah.
code. Like, that's the point of what you're certified in. And so I'm working towards that. But it's more than what we think it is. And the reality is everybody thinks we have all of these extra protections, and they're not extra. It's just making sure that I, as a vulnerable adult or I, as a vulnerable student, have the same right as my non-disabled peers. Why should I be penalized yet again because I happen to be born with whatever genetic makeup I was born with to live life the way I live life?
Yeah.
Why should I be penalized if I had a car accident or XYZ happen that made me become disabled at whatever time of life compared to my non-disabled counterpart? So, yeah, it's hard, and the hardest part in the world we live in now is when you have all the different AI bots and you have all the different, people that are getting paid to just sit and be negative naysayers or columnists or whatever to try to poke the bear and try to open things or get laws to be open. And it's like, when we don't know enough of how the systems work, you can't just throw out the whole system because you're hurting more people and causing harm than just trying to figure out and work within the system to correct the system.
Yeah. It seems so difficult in some respects. You talked about, the ADA is unfunded, and so it's like, "Hey, this needs to be done," but the, amount of money that it would take could almost be insurmountable in some ways. I think to the New York City subway system, I used to live off an express stop in Brooklyn. Only 1/3 of the New York City subway stations are handicap accessible. So I don't know if there's 400 stations. And so I guess what's the most important thing? Because, clearly it's very difficult for a handicapped person in New York City to get around. Like, what should be tackled first?
Hmm, that's an age-old question, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I As much as I hate to say it in some ways, is like, we have to maintain and take care of the things we currently have that work.
Mhm.
Because if
Yeah.
there's no maintenance plan, if there's no way of keeping good things good, then we're just continually shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Another thing that Above and Beyond with You promotes a ton is like, have you promoted what's accessible? Do you have a disability friendly site, pamphlet, map, XYZ, right?
Yeah.
Are you promoting on your social media? What is accessible? How do people get into your restaurant because your door is in the back? Well, how would we know that? Do you have signage? Do Do you truly want us in your space? Because if you do, you're going to tell us. Because, yes, I grew up back in the 80s and 90s. Yes, it was about the good old boys. Yes, it was about, well, we did this for Jenna and Jenna didn't show up. Well, did you tell Jenna? No. Did you only put the target on my head that we only made it for Jenna and you didn't tell all of the rest of the community that, hey, this event is accessible and here's how? If you answer no to any of those questions, well, then you didn't do your job and you don't really want us there.
Yeah.
So if you value it and it's not just a PC answer of, oh, of course, we want inclusion and
Right. Right.
accessibility, right? But if you truly want it, you're going to do it. If you truly want patrons who are very loyal, like that's the part that also blows people away. I think it's like, oh, I don't remember the number now, but it's like $39 billion a year that disabled people spend in the travel industry alone
Wow.
every year. It's like, but we have inaccessible hotel rooms. We have pool lifts that don't exist, or they exist, but nobody knows how to use them, or the batteries aren't, you know, powered up, or, whatever the it is. And it's like, really, you're saying you don't want it, where the disability community is the most loyal. If you can go to a place and you can get the food that you need, you can use the restroom, you can get in the door and out the door, that they care about you if there's a fire, right? Like all the things that you just don't typically think about. Yeah, I'm going to come back to your coffee shop every single time, even if I have to drive 30 miles out of the way. There might be
Right.
another coffee shop down the street, but I'm not going to go there because you don't make me feel safe and heard and cared for and a part of your community. So I'll drive 30 miles to go get my cup of coffee.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of it is just a heart condition. A lot of it's an attitude. And also it's just having these deep conversations, right? Finding somebody, whether it's me or Jamie or, anybody that's willing to have those conversations. Sometimes it's finding somebody that is a veteran within disability community. Sometimes people are new into our community and they're awesome and they're ready to have these vulnerable conversations, but sometimes people need a longer time of grace and acceptance and transition into this new life. So
What would
yeah.
what would you say to somebody who, you had, chronic conditions since you were 7, but, many people become paralyzed through instantaneous car accidents. So what is it like for those
Mm.
folks, and, what advice and comfort do you give to those people who are now entering a new world?
Yeah, a lot of times when I've had family or friends or community members that have a loved one that happens to, I don't pretend to know that, right? So I offer the support and the comfort of saying, hey, when you get to this point, if you'd like me to connect you to other people that have a similar lived experience that are farther along in their journey to what you are going to endure, I'd love to connect you. Here are some of the people that I follow that are giving me the pat on the back and that encouragement of, hey, if so and so here can do this, then so can I. It's going to look different because our disabilities are different, our medical conditions are different. And then of course, if they want me to want that encouragement from me, even though our situations are different, I'm all about that as well. But I'm just always very considerate of knowing that our stories started different and that that's okay. We can learn from each other, but I don't want to come across as a know-it-all because I don't. I know my story very well,
Yeah.
but I don't know all disability stories. So,
Right.
yeah.
Um, well, anything that I didn't ask? Any final thoughts?
Hmm. I would just encourage listeners to, take a moment and think about what does the word disability mean to them? And is it a positive connotation? Is it a negative connotation? Is it a neutral connotation? And are there older words that you use that maybe aren't okay anymore? You know, I always make the joke, and I still slip up and use the word handicap as well. But
I
I'm like,
did.
I'm not, yeah, that's all good. But I'm like, I'm not a golf term. So, like, I typically say it when I'm like, yeah, handicap parking. And I'm like, accessible parking. But it's so hard because in some conversations, accessible is going to mean different things.
Right.
So, I think it's really important. Words matter.
Okay.
The connotations of words matter. Our influxes of our voices matter. Our body language matters. And I would just encourage people to ask curious questions. Another example is like if you and I were in person, you can't see it now, but like I'm leaned back in a wheelie and, that's how my body is comfortable. And for me, then my brain is completely engaged with you. My heart is completely engaged with you. But again, if we were in person, you'd be like, oh, Jenna's leaning back. She's not engaged. She's, so
Right.
thinking about that interpersonal communication and seeing if you're making assumptions based on your non-disabled versions of body mechanics and all the things. And, if you do notice those things, be like, hey, Jen, I see you're kind of leaning back. Can you tell me what that means? I'll be like, yeah, I'm fully engaged. I'm comfortable. I'm here with you. What's up?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, curious questions, number one. And if the disabled person doesn't want to engage with your questions,
Like
respect
anybody
that.
else.
And just move on because
Yeah.
they're not ready. But maybe the next time when you ask a question, they'll be like, oh, you actually really do care. And I don't have to like have my exterior up because you're an honest, authentic person. So
words to avoid, words to use.
Words to avoid, definitely the R word. I would say, handicapped, handy different, differently abled, all those kinds of things. And again, this is for me and people that I hang out with. Some people like that in disability culture. I'm at a point in my role, my walk, whatever you want to say, my journey, that I don't want it infantized. I don't want it changed. My disability is not a bad word. It just is. And it's not fully me, but it's an important part of me.
Yeah.
Accessible is a good word, but just make sure when you're using it for disability, like mobility disability is great connotations. And I would say, other disabilities are not my wheelhouse, boom, ching. But I would definitely look up, because deaf culture has their do's and don'ts and their things to say and not say.
Right.
Blind, hard of hearing, wrong connotation, my bad. Blind, low vision have the same thing, right? So depending on what type of disability, there are things that you can say or shouldn't say. Same thing with autism, and I can't remember the correct verbiage, and I'm very sorry. But typically people will say nonverbal, and that is not legit anymore. So I too need to go and find the new verbiage for that because I've said it before, but it's the morning and I'm not all there. But I will get that verbiage in my tongue. And I think the biggest thing is if you make a mistake, people get it. If your heart is like, hey, blah, 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 then you're like, oh, teachable moment, right? So usually there's grace that goes with it. And, if you catch me on a day when I'm less graceful, then we have a conversation. But
yeah. You're less graceful, you're less inspirational days, I guess you could say.
Right. My more real rubber hits the road moments.
Well, Jenna, how can people find out more about you?
Yeah, best way is to go on our website, aboveandbeyondwithyou.org, and it's the letter U, not Y-O-U. Okay. You can find us on socials. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can check out my book, Within My Spokes, on Amazon or wherever you get your books.
All right. Well, Jenna, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for being on All Across America.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark.
All Across America is produced by me, Marco Vig, in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Visit us on Instagram at All Across America. Check out our website, allacrossamerica.com. There's an interactive map with all our episodes, and there's a Contact Us page where you can send your reactions, guest ideas, and suggestions. So get in touch, stay connected. To me, that's what podcasting is all about. Thanks for listening.